Hey, everybody, this is Shenandoah County Sheriff Tim Carter, and thank you for joining us today. Today we have with us, we have Captain Glenn Ogle with the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office. He's our Patrol Division Commander. And also a special guest is Beth Ogle, who is the Executive Director of Response Incorporated, which is our domestic violence shelter and sexual assault program within Shenandoah County. So, Beth, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
It is.
So I guess what we'll start off with is, we were talking about this before we went on air, and this has been pretty constant since I've been the sheriff here, quite frankly. If you go back and look 20 years ago, we were making about one arrest a week related to domestic violence. We're still doing that. It averages about one a week. We go on about 2 calls a week related to domestic violence. So I guess, it's out there. People have to, they're dealing with it. And I guess if there's anything about the topic as far as programs or things that you all are doing,
like to hear?
Let us know.
Sure. So domestic violence programming is something we do pretty extensively across the board. So we're working on prevention, and then we're here for services once a domestic violence in a home has occurred. We're here to provide emergency shelter for persons who need to get out of a domestic violence situation, who are not safe in their own homes. And then that's kind of where it starts. And then it is providing services from that point on, whether that be helping people obtain protective orders, helping them find new housing, helping them figure out how to be on a budget, a single income at that point. And we tend to work with people for years. It's not just a call and, we're handling crisis. We do that. That's bread and butter of what we do. But then those clients are ongoing. So we're working with them from the first call to getting them established on their own in their own household, and being able to maintain a household free from abuse is our main goal for every person that we're working with.
I know when, Glenn, when we respond to these things, there's certain requirements we have with regard to response to domestic violence. Did you want to talk about any of those things? Or?
Yeah, so when we go and we get a call for domestic violence, what we do, one is we make sure that everybody's safe. We make sure that we get people separated and we find out the story. We have to find out the story to figure out what happened. And then if a domestic assault has occurred, we shall arrest. We make an arrest. Now, kind of digging into that a little deeper, we also try to make sure in every case that we do reach out to response to make sure that they have the appropriate resources, they have a place to stay, and things of that nature. But that's what our response to that looks like.
We find pretty good interaction with the victims as far as making sure they're connected to those services. I mean, what would you think about that?
Well, 100%. On our end, we do we offer them and we try our hardest to get them lined up with the response, and I think we do a pretty good job at doing that on most cases. I mean, there are those one-off cases where we just maybe they don't contact you or whatever the case may be, but we do provide that information.
Do you think most of your clients come through a response by law enforcement, or where would you put that at?
So sometimes, yes. It's hard to gauge because a responding officer might be their first initial contact,
right,
and the officer gives them our information. But sometimes they're not ready to call at that point. So we might not get a call from them for months later. And so whereas that initial contact was made with the law enforcement, they're not telling us, I was referred by law enforcement. It's something they've kind of held on to.
Right.
And then contacted us later. And that happens quite frequently. One thing that you guys established, oh my gosh, probably 5 years ago, was having us come in when you're doing your training for your officers fresh out of the academy. So they're getting that training from us immediately so that they know that we're a resource. We give them little packets that they can carry in their vehicle so they have our information. So I think that's made a big difference of them knowing exactly what's available right away and how we can be a resource for them. And so sometimes it's not the caller that calls, sometimes it's law enforcement that calls us directly and they're like, hey, we have this going on. How can you all help in this situation? And then we make contact with the person and maybe they're not ready to come in that day, but almost always we hear from them eventually.
Right.
And it's that first contact that made that possible.
Right. When I know many times when people are there and they're seeking shelter, this is not just a one-person thing, it's a family thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys are set up to manage through those issues, I think, correct?
Yes, to manage the entire family.
Right.
So it's not just the survivor, but it's their kids. And so we have child and youth services to help with support groups, to kind of be a person who can reach out to the school on the survivor's behalf and kind of let them know with survivor's permission, this is what's going on. Let's form some wraparound services for this family. So we're working in the schools. We're working with guidance counselors, with student support specialists, with law enforcement, with our court system. It's a big umbrella of people. It certainly takes a village to get people through this.
Yeah, because I was going to, I guess you kind of sort of answered it. I mean, it's not just getting him in the court on the right day. It's a little bit more, well, not a little bit, a lot more extensive than that. So you're helping them actually get substance abuse services, mental health, behavioral health services as well. All of that's part of the...
All of that, yeah.
You know.
And every case is different, and what family needs are different for every family. And so that's our starting point. It's literally our starting point. We walk them through what we call a needs assessment. And it's, okay, this is happening. Let's look at everything you're going to need from this point forward. And then we try, if it's not something we can help them with directly, then we have partnerships with Shenandoah Alliance for Shelter, should it be housing need, Family Promise, we work closely with them, DSS, all of these different service providers we get in touch with so that we make sure we're giving these people the best shot possible to move on.
How about, I know you guys were doing something at one point as far as like dating violence and things like that with young people. You want to talk about that at all?
I do. So I'm really excited about this because we just got a new prevention grant. So this is something we've been trying to do for a long time, but we haven't had the funding behind it. So now we've gotten this specialized prevention grant. We were able to set up a position strictly to handle all of our prevention curriculum. And we got that in March, and it's really hit the ground running. We've already done several support groups. We're working with, again, the schools. We're working with GAP, which is Grandparents as Parents, Parks and Rec, like everybody that is coming into contact with DSS, working very closely with DSS. Everybody who comes in contact with families who need extra support in, you can kind of see it. It's helping them make sure that their kids have a better shot at not becoming victims. And so we're doing it in schools, we're doing it in the community. We provide meals, childcare so that parents can utilize these services. And it's teaching them how to talk to their kids and develop relationships with their kids and put some resiliency in place and put some protections in place to make sure that they have these relationships that help their kids know what's healthy and unhealthy in a relationship.
Yeah, I would say most of our calls are more adult related. Wouldn't you think, Glenn?
Yep, that's what we mostly.
Yeah,
and it starts pretty young with kids. We see it in schools with bullying, and and unhealthy friendships. And
Right.
if we don't correct that, then that becomes the expectation. It's okay for a person to treat me like this, and that's normal, and that's okay. And so it's really just trying to interrupt that.
You know, we've been doing some, having some discussions about mental health lately. And I'm not seeing it on the domestic violence calls, but I know with regard to mental health, behavioral health calls, it seems like after COVID, that just kind of, you know,
Yeah. So,
came out a lot. I don't know. I don't know if that's happening with you in your world or not.
well, where we are seeing mental health and a lack of resources and trying to make sure we get those resources are, I think what is hard for people to understand is that most survivors of domestic violence have pretty significant PTSD. You know, we think of PTSD in law enforcement, we think of it in military, but these are people who are on high alert at all times. And that messes with you. That changes how you view the world. It changes how you interact with the world. And trauma, whether it's domestic violence or whether it's sexual assault, really affects people's mental health significantly. And so that's part of, you know, it's not just getting them into a household that they can sustain financially. It is getting them to a place where they can be present for their kids, where they can show up for work and not have to leave early because they're dealing with trauma. You know, it's getting them over this trauma, which takes years and takes those services, those mental health services.
Okay. What am I missing here, Glenn?
She's covered a whole lot.
I know. Yeah, she has.
I can talk for hours.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking, I know what I wanted to say because of something you just said. You know, I just had an interview. We just did an interview, and it was on the whole Marcus Alert thing, right? And you know, I don't think people, because we've also had discussions about staff, mental health, and, you know, what they have to deal with. And, you know, as I'm sitting here thinking about that interview, and I'm sure you have to deal with it as well. The stress on the staff, a lot of people don't see that.
No.
And they don't really, it doesn't even cross their it doesn't even get on their radar. You know what I'm saying? You know, I was just telling, I forget the example I used when I was talking to a reporter just a little bit ago, and I told her, I said, you know, we get somebody calling here every week that wants to take their own life. Now, you think about that for a moment. Does the Northern Virginia Daily get a call every week of somebody wanting to take their own life? And the answer is no. But we do. And not only do we do that, now we have a person who's on the other end of the phone trying to get them services, trying to get them help, and also trying to process that, you know, as far as how that makes them feel.
Yeah, and it's even worse when there's a lack of services.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so you're trying so hard to get this person help. You're worried about them. You're worried about your community. And there doesn't feel like there's a solution, and that there's a helplessness in that feeling. I mean, I think most of us get into this work to help people, and when you keep hitting walls and walls and walls and you can't help a person who's, you know, devastated, it affects you on a human level. It's hurtful, and there's no way around that. Add to that what you're witnessing, the stories you're hearing, you know, it takes its toll.
Okay. What am I missing then? What else?
Well, one thing that I always like to touch on when we're talking about domestic violence, because I feel like it's maybe the big myth of domestic violence, is that, and I always like an opportunity to correct it, is I think a lot of people think, okay, you're in a situation where someone's harming you, you get out of the situation, you're safe. Situation's over. And that is absolutely not the case. That's why we are working with survivors for years at a time, because they are in situations where there might be a protective order in place and they're still having to share custody with this person. They still have to be in contact with this person who's been physically, emotionally, financially, verbally abusive to them for most of the time years. And domestic violence is about power and control. And so when you take that control back and leave the situation, that's when you're at the most danger. That's the height of danger, because that is when the other person starts to lose control. That's when they act out. That's why domestic violence calls are so dangerous for law enforcement, because that person has started to lose control. So I just really want people to be mindful when they are hearing from survivors or when they're hearing a story that it's not as simple, leave and you're okay. It doesn't end when you leave, and you really need help to get through that.
Yeah, that I've been around for a long time, and that was the attitude 35, 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. Well, they just go somewhere else, it's over.
Yeah.
And it's not. Mm-mm. It's a little bit more, a lot more complicated than that.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. How about, do you all deal with any type of related to like elder
abuse?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we do. We obviously, any of our services that we provide are provided to a person of any age, and we try to do specific training based around elder abuse and working with APS and doing that. I think what gets harder about elder abuse, in the same way that it gets hard with child abuse, is a lot of times our elder community is dependent on the abuser,
right?
Just to get around. So, and then they are adults, so they get to make decisions for themselves. So, trying to get them to get services or to talk about this person who is often a loved one can be very, very difficult for them to open up. And housing is more limited for our elderly population, just because they tend to have less access to be able to get up and downstairs if there's not elevator, that type of thing.
Right.
So it's its own complex situation. But yes, we do work with the elder population.
Okay.
So
I think another myth that might be out there as well is gender, as far as
that we only work with women.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
our services, one, are free and confidential.
Right.
That's the biggest. But they all are also available to men and women. So, yes, Thank you for bringing that up.
Yep. And then one other thing is domestic violence is definitely something that impacts the community, because most of the time there are kids involved, and those kids see that, and then again, those are kids that are growing up and they're seeing this and they're going through this. How can people get involved with response?
That's a great question. So we have community outreach. We do training for communities. We do training for schools. We do training for church groups. Anybody who might come in contact with a family who is experiencing domestic violence and wants to know, how do we help them? How do we move forward? We are happy to come out and work with them, to talk to them. But also we talk to these groups because these people are sometimes on juries. Sometimes they are, they might see something, but they don't know exactly what it is. So it's just to educate people so they know how to recognize when somebody might be in an abusive situation and is kind of throwing hints, but not actually telling you that they're in that situation, or just to be prepared when somebody discloses, like, what's the best way to respond so that they keep disclosing and they keep relying on you. Because in domestic violence, that person is often isolated. They don't have help, and they don't think that anybody wants to help them.
Right.
So it's just preparing people to be that initial contact for them.
Right. Okay. So, Beth, as far as like if a person wanted to support response, what might they do?
The easiest thing is to go to our website, responseva.org. We have a donor button there where they can donate to us. They can also call, because there's different needs that we need throughout the month, throughout the year.
Right.
We're running a shelter, so we always need those household items that most households need: paper towels, laundry detergent, those kinds of things. We keep a running list up on the website of our needs. And we are always, always, always in need of gas cards or gift cards to grocery stores. And we monitor those. They have to bring a receipt back. But those are always really important to be able to give to our clients, because a lot of times people are coming to us with nothing.
Right. Okay. Yep. Well, guys, I think we covered a lot of topics this morning, and I appreciate you coming in. And I know this was kind of short notice. We called you yesterday, and but we wanted to get something out early to promote what you guys, the good work you all are doing, and the services that are out there, especially this month for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the platform, and anytime we're able to talk about our services, we really jump at the opportunity.
Sure. And I know, you got a lot of good staff there, Beth, a lot of good people working with you and supporting you, full-time staff as well as people that are contributing to the community. I know a lot of those people, and we want to thank all of them for their support and help with response.
Absolutely. Our board volunteers are amazing. Our just regular volunteer staff are all great people.
Okay. Well, again, thanks for coming in, and thanks for listening today. This has been Sheriff Tim Carter. You can find this podcast as well as other podcasts on my YouTube channel, and that is at Timothy Carter. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe or smash that like button. And hope you all have a great day. Thank you.